Welcome to Fragmented, a software developer podcast where we talk about building good software and becoming better developers. My name's Donn Felker.
And I'm Kaushik Gopal.
Welcome to the show. Hey everybody, before we get going, I wanted to let you know about a product that I'm creating called Stoa. Stoa is a platform for community creators and anyone really who is building a community. Maybe you have a community that you are passionate about, such as photography, or maybe it's something in regards to cars or motorcycles or woodworking or anything of that nature. Maybe it's dancing. Whatever your community is, if you're looking to build it and monetize it, Stoa is a place for you. You can have discussions, communicate privately with DMs and private chats, and have various different spaces internally where you can discuss all the different things regarding your community and monetize it as well. If this is something that's interesting or you know of someone else who's interested in it, you can go to getstoa.com, plug in your email address, and when we launch, you'll get 3 months free of the product. And as well, you can always reach out to me directly if you have questions. So again, that is Stoa. You can go to getstoa.com for more information. Thanks. All right, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the podcast here. Kaushik's not with me this time, but though I do have a special guest today that has a story that I really want everybody to hear. I think one of the things that's really fundamental about software development is how open it is to anyone who wants to do it. If you have the drive, you have the determination, and you want to become a software developer, you can. It doesn't really matter your background, doesn't really matter your age. For a lot of you that maybe don't even know this, software development is not my first career. My first career was actually a cabinet maker and as well as a motorcycle mechanic. And I didn't switch careers until my early 20s. So I still started kind of early. But there are many people that don't switch until their late 20s, their 30s, their 40s, or even later. And today I have a friend of mine here on the show, and he is going to help kind of tell the story of how he went from one career, which is not related to software at all, into a software development career. And it's a very interesting story. And I kind of wanted to get some tips and tricks and advice from him for other people that are in a very similar boat and trying to make that transition. So without further ado, Ephraim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Donn. It's very exciting to be here. I've been a long time Fragmented listener, so this is going to be fun.
Yeah, it's great. And so just for a background, you and I have been talking, I don't know, for a year, 2 years online, either through just random Twitter or Instagram or whatever. And you did tell me that you had kind of been listening through Fragmented and so forth. And then we hopped into I don't know how we did it, but I asked where you worked or something like that. And then you told me that you had a different career. But before we hop down that path too much, why don't you tell everyone kind of your kind of short little version of your background and where you are now and where you work now and what you do, so we can kind of get that big picture, and then we'll dive into the details.
Sure. So currently I'm working at a company called First Form. So it's, health, fitness, supplements. I am a team of one working on, what I kind of consider to be like spontaneous apps and websites. Kind of, the owners will be like, oh, it would be neat if we could do this. So then they hand me whatever this is, and I have to just go do it. So that's what I'm currently doing. My background, my longest career was in the car business. So I was a salesman for about 16 years in the car industry. Most recently, I was in the exotic car end. So a lot of fun cars, Bentleys, Lamborghinis, etc. But that's where I was before I transferred into software development.
Interesting. So that kind of gives me when I hear the word exotic, I think a lot of money. And when I think a lot of money, I know a little bit about car sales. I don't know much. I just know that a lot of car salesmen run off commission, and exotic cars probably garner a lot of commission. So I guess the question is it seems like someone in the exotic car industry would be making a lot of money, or is it a very difficult industry to make money in?
So I definitely was making very decent money. So, it was a very different world. It was 100% commission. And, it was very much a feast or famine. I could make 30 grand one month and literally make zero the next. But yeah, when I left, I was topping about $1.80. So I was making very decent money.
So That's a good point. A lot of people probably hear that number like, wow, I wish I could make that much money and that would be amazing. But what was the what was a driver for you to say, you know what, hey, this career maybe isn't for me. I want to go do something else. And how did you decide that it was software?
So the biggest driver was really quality of life. First off, I was working 6 days a week, 70-hour weeks, at least. And it wasn't something that I loved doing. It was just something that I could do. I could do well, and I could support my family off of. So after doing that for so long and not actually liking and being excited about what you're doing, it just became, a massive grind. Sure, there are benefits. There was some cool things I got to do and see and interesting people, but day to day, I was not waking up excited to go into work. It was, very much a, Monday morning dread type situation. And that started to wear on me as I got older and older and realized that it's not going to get better. And if I wanted to change that, I had to make a massive change. And for anybody that's been in sales, sales just transfers to sales. So if you don't want to be in sales, you have to do something kind of drastic. As far as how did I choose software development, I had been playing around for many years with websites and things just on the side for myself, maybe friends. I started back in, a little after 2000, back in the, HTML, PHP scripting, that sort of world, but never really excelled beyond just a basic website. But I love doing it. I love creating things. And so when looking at my options, one of those things that people ask, if you had $1 million, and you could do anything, what would you do? And that's what I would do. I would program. So that's the direction that I decided to go down.
Interesting. I don't know. I'm thinking from personal experience and thinking about it and putting myself in your shoes and thinking like that had to be a really difficult decision. Was there a lot of dread going into it? Like, oh my goodness, I've spent this number of years in my life. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this transition. Or what was going through your head at the time when you kind of made that decision to say, all right, I'm going to make that switch?
Sure. In the beginning, it was definitely scary even thinking about it. One thing that I knew was going to happen is I was going to go from, making very decent money, supporting a family of five, to not making very decent money because I'd be starting off at, ground zero. I'd be competing with people that could afford to sell their services significantly cheaper than, I was used to. And then, one of the biggest dreads too is just like, can I actually do it? Can I catch up with everybody that's been in this industry? Can I learn fast enough, et cetera? Luckily for me, I came from a sales background where you have to have, the sort of confidence that borderlines ego. So I very quickly told myself that I can do it. And so that's what I did. But it was definitely scary.
Okay. So you had a lot of determination and you just a lot of like willpower and knowing that you're going to, confidence that you're going to get this stuff done. So when you determined that, you made that decision like, okay, this is the direction I'm going. I'm kind of going to point my sail that way. I'm going to start going there. How did you go from, your very basic knowledge of web development that you had, and how did you get into more of a professional software development? And kind of as an ancillary question on top of that, how did you move or decide to go into, mobile or web development or both?
Sure. So, the first thing that I actually did was so I didn't go to college. Well, I went and then just dropped out of every class and never completed anything. The first thing that I thought about was like, oh crap, this isn't sales. They probably care about a college degree. So I kind of dug into that, like, well, what does that take? How could I do that? And I found an online program that was a work at your own pace.
Mm-hmm.
And it was to get a bachelor's degree in information technology. And so I ended up doing that, and I finished a 4-year degree in about 16 months.
Whoa.
And then I came out the other end and didn't really feel like I knew much more. I was pretty deflated and talked to some people that I knew that were programmers, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you don't actually learn how to be a programmer in college." And it's just like, I wish somebody would have told me that in the beginning. So, the primary language that they used was Java. And for me, I'd always been, an Android person, and I liked mobile apps and I believed in it. Now, remember, this was even, this was 6, 7, 8 years ago. And, apps, there was quite a bit, but it wasn't as prolific as it is now. But apps is really what I wanted to do. And I wasn't a fan of iOS or the iPhone. So it was like, okay, if I'm going to do mobile, I'm going to do Android. And I already know Java. So, that was obviously well before the Kotlin revolution. So that's what I dove into. And that's kind of how I picked it. It wasn't as thought out as maybe as it should have been, or maybe I shouldn't have thought it out anymore. I just kind of picked what I liked and thought was cool, and then I went full fledged.
Yeah, I have a very similar experience when I went to college. I had got lucky enough where I had talked myself into a kind of technical support, like scripting type position. And when I graduated, I felt the same way. That the skills that I had learned, no one taught me how to build professional software in college. And I mean, hopefully some of those things have changed, but I still feel that it's very much that way. You're just getting the basic fundamentals in a 4-year degree, which is really unfortunate. So you went down that road as well. You got out of college and you said, all right, I'm going to do Android, but you weren't at the level to be a professional software developer. So what resources did you use to figure out how to become a software developer? Did you read any books? Did you watch any YouTube video courses, take some other online courses, or what did you do to kind of get yourself to that level where you felt, all right, I'm a professional. I feel confident at least that I can kind of get an entry level position somewhere?
Sure. So, the first thing that I started to do was, I would say YouTube and podcasts were the first two things that I kind of turned to, and I also, what I always suggest and what I did was tried to build something, and I tried to build an app, and I probably rewrote the thing 7 times. And it actually still exists out there, and brings in a couple bucks each month. But it was based off of a mobile game that I was playing, and so I thought it'd be fun. And just the process of actually building that, and really running into problems was the biggest help. Creating a feature and then trying to create a new feature and finding out that I couldn't because of how I wrote it, and just kind of going over and over the code and just refactoring and refactoring, but YouTube was big. I did read a handful of books. I'm trying to think of what I started out with. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my books here. The design patterns, the head first book, various design pattern books. I got an iOS programming book. The books are decent, but I think that what helped more was the YouTube in how to do stuff. And then I think almost the podcasts were what don't I know. So I would listen to, your podcast, or the other big one that I liked was Adventures in Angular. And I would listen to the conversation and I would understand 10% of it, but I would just be making notes. Like, well, what is this thing? What are streams? What is, this or that, and the various topics and libraries. And, then that would give me like, okay, well, this person is dedicating a podcast to this thing. I should probably understand what that thing does and how I could use it. And then I'd go back and read dozens of articles, and that's the other thing. I read a lot of articles, but that is really kind of how it all kicked off.
That's an excellent. I'm kind of loss of words right now because it really mirrors how I got going into this stuff as well. When early in my career, I did the same exact thing. It was find some books, kind of learn from those books a little bit. I have found over the years now that a lot of books are almost, by the time they come out, they're almost out of date because technology is moving so fast, which is a bummer. So I did the same thing. I relied on podcasts. And at the time when I started, I wasn't an Android dev. I was a .NET dev, and I listened to a bunch of .NET podcasts, and the same thing would happen. They would talk about something and complete confusion. Like, wow, okay, I didn't even know this existed. This is really cool. That would have solved a huge problem for me that I had last month or whatever. But ultimately, what I think for me is the big takeaway here that a lot of people need to hear, and it's something that I preach a lot, is that you actually went out and built an app or multiple apps. And the thing that really I wrote down here in my notes is that you rewrote it, in quotes, 7 times, maybe more, maybe less, I don't know. But to me, that's something I still do. Just this morning, I'm rewriting some app because I'm trying to understand how this piece of technology should work with it. And I have to rewrite it. I have to run it. I have to debug it. I have to kind of see how everything's set up. And then I'll, just like you, realize it was written wrong and then go re-implement it. So it seems like it was very useful to you. Do you still find yourself doing a very similar thing to that when you're learning a new technology?
Absolutely. And I'm consistently trying to, branch out. Right now I've been focusing a lot on Solidity, which is for the Ethereum platform and blockchain. And in the beginning, I almost don't even try to do it right. I just try to do it. Just try to get it to work, with especially the small understanding that I have, and then step back. And it's like, okay, what makes me cringe? What can I not read after a week? And just find all of those sort of issues, and then, okay, so now that I understand how to do it at the basic level, what would make this code more elegant? What would make this code easier to read? What would make this code easier to extend, et cetera? And then I go back and rewrite it. So yeah, I'm still following that same process today for sure.
I think what you said there is very important, how you are you're not worried about doing the perfect architecture right out of the gate when you're learning something new. You want to just get it working. That's also something that I do as well. I approach things which is what you're doing, with a beginner mindset and just kind of letting everything go. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Can I get it to do what I want to do? Now, can I clean it up afterwards? That to me is such an incremental and iterative way of learning that it just solidifies everything, because I'm able to see the progression of very simple to complex. Because too many people, in my opinion, try to go, or they'll listen to podcasts like ours and they'll hear something about, MVVM or MVI architecture or whatever, and all of a sudden they're down a rabbit hole trying to implement that on a brand new project. When, hey, you know what, does that project really need it? Or can you just do something simple and implement it right away,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree.
So during this whole process of you moving over from car sales, which, you have a deep career in that, and then moving into, mobile development or web development and just development in general, what would you say was probably the most challenging aspect of this process? And it doesn't have to be technical. It could be just, a mental shift, anything.
I think the toughest part was really just, mentally, the toughest part was, am I ready and can I do it? So, I started learning this stuff, but obviously I had to get to a point where I felt like I could do this full time and have somebody pay me and not get fired, right? Be able to live up to the job that I'm actually applying for. And, mentally that was definitely difficult, because I was very siloed. It was just me. None of my friends, I knew one guy, that was a developer, and anybody that I found out was a developer, I'd ask him questions, but I was very much alone. So I had no gauge of, where was I compared to the industry? What can I expect? And, so that was a really big, just unknown. So I think that was probably, one of the most difficult parts of, that in between transition.
When you had that feeling of, I'm not sure if I'm going to compare, I don't know if I can get this job, land a job. When did you feel confident enough that you were ready to go apply somewhere? And part 2 to that is how did you find your first, career job in software?
So as far as how did I decide, I don't think there is a good answer to that. It was like, okay, I got to do it. Let's just do it. And I felt like, okay, I built an app. It was used by a bunch of people. I've built a bunch of websites at this point. I feel like I can be dropped into something and worst case, figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And, so it wasn't very scientific how I decided how I actually got my first job. So it probably took me 2 years to get it. Yeah, it took forever.
Were you applying all over the place, or what did you do?
first off, I had no idea how to get a job. So I was just, trying to manually send in my resume places, and that didn't work. I updated my resume and sent it into all the standard places, the monster.com and all of that. My resume was garbage, and that didn't work. So I did that for quite some time and got zero traction.
Okay.
And then I was talking to a guy I know who was actually a client, and he was a software developer. And he was like, no. You have to go through recruiters. All of these big companies use recruiters. You're not just going to find a job. You have to go through them. So it's like, oh crap. Okay. And he looked at my resume and explained to me why it was garbage. And so I had to go through that process. Let's figure out, how to really write a resume that shows that I know something while also not being able to really prove it, given that I've never had a job before, doing this full time. And I did take on things, more IT type stuff. I did all the networking for the dealership. I did, manage their website, things like that, but it was not full time. So then I started trying to reach out to recruiters, and that was difficult too, because I had a lot of people that really just, you're not going to be able to, to get the money that you want, which is funny because when I started out, it was like, look, I want, 70, 80 grand a year.
Yeah.
And I had a bunch of people that just told me, no, it's not going to happen. It'll take you years to get to that place, a lot of negativity.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept saying, you know what? No, I'll make it. I'll get it. I'll find somebody. My first job ended up paying 65 grand a year, which was obviously a massive hit, but I was happy to grab it. So eventually, how I got my first job, I did find a really good recruiter, Chris Rakel, and he had a conversation with me beforehand, which was one of those things that you learned pretty quickly with the recruiters, is that the people that just want to get your resume, they're not going to help. All they're doing is just blasting it to people. They want to put it, they want to put your piece of paper in a stack of pieces of paper so it looks like they're doing something. They don't really care anything about you. That you're all just paper to them. This guy was different. He had a conversation with me, really dug into, what he thought I could do, and then he had an opportunity. And so I went down that, had the interview, and I kept telling these people, look, just honestly, get me in front of somebody. Get me in front of somebody and I'll get the job. I guarantee it. Because the one thing that I did for the last 16 years was sell. And an interviewing is just selling yourself. And he did. He got me the interview and I got the job. And then that was, probably one of the scariest things.
That's a fantastic story in itself. And I think there's a number of things that I wanted to talk about here. But the one that you just said just now, which is an interview is selling yourself. And I don't think a lot of developers really realize that. They are expecting their resume or some open source work to really drive home, look what I can do. But if you're, like, as you said, if you're able to sit down in front of somebody and talk to them, and if you know how to sell like you do, it's much easier. So I'm not saying that you need to become a salesman, anybody who's listening to this, but any type of soft skills that you can develop is just going to help you at the end of the day. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think that's one thing that I've noticed in this industry. I came from basically all soft skills, interacting with people, interacting with colleagues, et cetera, to this industry, which I think is grossly, I think it's misunderstood a lot of times and it's forgotten about a lot of times. I think that, how you interview, and then also how, once you get the job, how do you interact with, with the managers, with the POs, the BAs, et cetera, is far more important than, what you have on your resume or even your skill level, because those two things are easy and you get the opportunities through the personal connections, and you do the work through your skill. So oftentimes I've seen this many times with people. They never get the opportunity, even though they have the skill. They don't get the opportunity because they don't know how to grab it. They don't know how to ask for it. They don't know how to position themselves for it. so they don't get the opportunity, but they have the skill, and they think that, well, like, I learned this, I'm good at this. Why shouldn't I get the opportunity? It's like, well, it's going to end up going to somebody else who does understand these things. So I think that that's a very crucial element that isn't driven home enough.
Now, I don't know if you're going to know the answer to this question because you've come from a background in sales, so a lot of this might be just second nature to you. But for someone who's listening who might be lacking in some of these skills, is there any tips you could provide to them to say, here's how you can improve your soft skills? Maybe it's, mock interviews. Maybe it's, reading a book or something like that does this. Do you have any tips for someone that might be in that situation?
Absolutely. And I've helped out a lot of developers since I've been in this industry, because it is not only is it something that a lot of people are lacking, it's something that there's not a lot of people to teach them. So I've helped a lot of people, and a lot of it is first off to step back and understand just people. Understand that, okay, well, what makes you stand out is oftentimes really just being empathetic to other people. So I always use the example of, you're in a meeting. So we have, many of us have given meetings, been in charge of meetings, right? And you're presenting, you're doing your thing, you're trying to get interaction, and nobody is. Right. Nobody's answering the questions. They're all acting as if they're rhetorical. Nobody, there's just no interaction. You're wondering if anybody's even listening, and it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. And then, and it's exhausting. And then you're done with the 30 minutes, 1 hour meeting, and, it sucked. Now take that and you do that same thing, but then there's somebody that's interacting with you, that's asking questions, that's, engaged, that's trying to get other people, into it, et cetera. At the end of that meeting, you feel good. You personally feel good, right? So, and this is what your boss feels. They feel good. That was a good meeting. And why do they feel good? Whether it's conscious or subconscious, they know that the reason is because of you. You were interacting, you were asking questions, you were being lively. And so now they walk away with a really good feeling about you, because now their job was better, right? So it's empathy, it's understanding that everyone else is doing these jobs as well, and when their job is easier because of you, they're going to naturally gravitate towards you, right? When they're picking a team, it's like, well, who do you want to work with? Donn. And whether or not it's because they're thinking about it or not, but every interaction with you for them is a positive one. So what do they want to do? They want that. They want their team to be dynamic. They want their job to be easier. So just stepping back and understanding kind of, that psychology, on the same point, and if I'm getting too long-winded, feel free to cut me off. On the same point, when you think about like an interview, what do people want? What makes their lives easier? Most of us are driven by what makes our lives easier, what makes us happier, what helps us do better. So when you're interviewing, what do you want? You want somebody who you feel is just going to do the job, who's going to be confident, right?
Yeah.
When you exude confidence in an interview, that person feels like, okay, I'm going to be able to give this person a task and walk away and just know they're going to do it because this person is good at what they do, right? Or this person is really pleasant and I like having a conversation with them. Well, guess who you're going to have a lot of conversations with? A person that you hire. So if that interview is like an easy conversation, that's ingraining in that interviewer's head that, hey, I can do this. I can have this conversation with this person every day, and that feels good. So that's what they're going to gravitate towards when they're picking between you and someone that it was like pulling teeth trying to get any conversation out of them. And for any of us that have done interviews, you know what I'm talking about. It can be brutal when you're not able to flow with them. So what do you think? Psychologically, you're thinking this is going to be difficult to deal with this person. So the biggest tip is, what do you want? And then be that for someone else.
That's huge right there. I think that the empathy and helping and just being friendly. I can't tell you how many interviews I've went through myself for, consulting positions wherever, where it may not even have been a technical interview and the management will like me simply because I can communicate with them very easily and very effectively. And that's huge. And again, it just takes practice and so forth. I think anyone who's listening, if you're hunting for a job, I would really bookmark this episode, go back and rewind and listen to the last, rewind, listen to the whole episode, but that piece right there by Ephraim is pure gold. So thank you for that. The other thing that I wanted to bring up that you mentioned is that you had done the website and some tech stuff for the dealership. Now, I'm going to most likely assume that they just didn't walk over to your desk one day and be like, hey, do you want to do a website? They probably had to learn that you knew that, and you probably volunteered that. Did you volunteer?
So you're absolutely right. Nobody came up to me. It wasn't even they learned, it was just I told. I'm going to do this. And guess what most bosses say when you say, I'm going to do more work for you for free? Yeah, do that. And it's not like they had somebody that was dealing with the website or whatever. And it was just, I'll do this, and then I'll do this, and then I'll do this. And I just kept adding things on. And then it just kind of turned into part of my job. And a majority of that, sometimes they'd flip me a little bit here or there, but like I never got paid for any of that. And I was dealing, I did any troubleshooting with the computers. I dealt with all the networks, but I looked at it as, this is free training for me.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of I'm doing extra work for free, I was looking at it as this is free training for me. I get to practice on their stuff, and they're not going to fire me because I'm bad at networking. And I don't mean networking with people, actually, servers, etc. They're not going to fire me because I'm bad at networking, because my job is sales, right? So I get to screw up. I get to, practice and learn. And, any of the poor people that we would actually pull in, the professional IT people, had to endure just an onslaught of questions from me. Well, why are you doing this? And I couldn't figure this. This is what I was thinking. Why was that wrong? And just, took every opportunity I could to learn anything I could about the internet, programming, anything.
This is something that I wish, and I hope a lot of people get away from this talk and this is also something that I talk about a lot as well. People come to me all the time saying, I'm looking to break into software. I've got a degree. I've been practicing at home. What can I do? And I tell them, and that same thing for consulting and contracting. It's like, you know what? Go out and find somebody who needs something. It could be your family's business. It could be where you already work like you do, and just offer to do it for free. Provide that value. What you do is you then amplify your value to that company exponentially. Because all of a sudden, not only can Ephraim sell exotic cars and make, the business a bunch of money that way, he can also take care of our website, and he also helps network everything. Okay, now Ephraim's a lot more valuable than this other person over here. Not to discount this other person, but now you've just demonstrated that you have so much more skill in other places to that business. So that A, that's job security, but B, it also gives you, like you said, on-the-job training, and you can throw that on your resume. So yes, I do have experience handling websites or building X, Y, and Z. I did it at this company for the last 2 years. That's legit experience, even if you didn't get paid extra for it. So if you are listening to the podcast and you're trying to get your feet wet, find something. It could be just your church. It could be a local, group you're part of, or anything. It could be a fire department, whatever. Offer to build something. That's exactly what I did too for my career. I started in the music industry and I built a bunch of band websites. And it helped me kickstart my career. So fantastic stuff. I love that.
On a similar note, and you say, offer to do things. One thing that I did do, who's one of the owners of my current company, his wife did, like health stuff, and she had like a bunch of recipes, and her website was just one giant page. Right. And you just would scroll down forever to read the various ones. So I thought, you know what? I want to get better at this point, it was like WordPress. And now you couldn't put a gun to my head and make me use WordPress. But at that time, I wanted to learn it. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to build it. And I literally built her a website. And then, and I didn't know her either. I had never talked to her. I had never met her. She was just the wife of a client of mine, who happens to now be my boss. And then I told my boss when it was done, I sent him a link and said, "Hey, I made this for your wife. If she wants it, she can have it. If she doesn't, that's okay. She didn't ask for it, but if she wants it, I'll set it up for her and she can start using it." And she was ecstatic, and that also, I'm sure, helped me with my relationship with my client. But I literally just did it and then just said afterwards, "Hey, you want this?" And what was the worst that she could do? No. Okay. Well, I learned a lot. Great. And it gave me a goal of something to build that I didn't have to make up.
Mhm.
Right.
I know the background story on this, of course, because we've talked about this exact story. But for those that aren't listening, when you say client, they're listening to a software podcast. They're probably thinking, "Oh, software client." That's not what this is. This is when you were still a car salesman, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. Absolutely. This had nothing to do with, nobody would have expected this. And it wasn't what I was doing. This was a guy I sold cars to.
And so the guy you sold cars to, you realized his wife probably could use a nice updated refresh website. You had no clue who she was, never talked to her, said, "You know what? I'm just going to go build this. And worst case scenario, I'm going to learn a bunch of stuff." And then when you were done, you just kind of sent it over, said, "Hey, I built this for your wife. If she likes it, she can have it." And then automatically, I almost guarantee, like you said, she was blown away by it. He was probably blown away by it. And it just probably opened a bunch of doors. And now, fast forward years later, I assume, you said that's
Yeah.
your boss, right?
Yeah. And now I work for him, and I have a good relationship with both him and his wife.
That's fantastic. That's an amazing story, dude. Now, a couple of questions to kind of wrap this up here. But what I'm really wondering here is, are you happy that you made this change into software? And do you really miss anything about your past career or past life?
There were definitely cool things in my past life, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't have fun, driving $500,000 cars around. But honestly, I don't think twice about it. I love it, and I wake up every day excited about my work. Like, my regular day-to-day work is programming, and guess what programming is? It's building stuff, it's solving problems. So every day I wake up and it's like, okay, now here's the 8 to 9 to 10 hours, whatever I'm, for that day that I'm dedicating to this. And this is what I'm doing. And there's no, my wife, it kills her. I never know what day it is because it doesn't matter to me. If it's Saturday, if it's Monday, if it's Friday, they're all the same because I really enjoy what I'm doing. And I get to just get up every day and do it. And when I'm not doing it for someone else, I'm doing it for myself. So yeah, absolutely best thing I ever did.
That's awesome, man. For right now, you said you are building like an app or website. What are you doing? Android development? Are you doing iOS development, or what exactly are doing right now in regards to technology?
Right now, I've been focusing a lot on Flutter.
Okay.
So I've actually even started to transition any new website I build. I use Flutter as well.
Oh, wow.
It's really just a great stack. There's give and takes. Look, Kotlin is a better language than Dart, full stop. But, I get to build once and deploy multiple. And that is just worth too much. There's still a lot I love about the Android environment, but the give and takes, Flutter just kind of wins. And, in the web world, the development, cycle of just getting something up is just so much faster with Flutter. And then also, by choosing Flutter for everything, I'm a lot more focused. One thing that kills me is having, different parts of the day switching languages.
Yeah.
And writing const instead of final, or just like those little things, just like, crap, what language am I in? So, that helps out a lot as well. But yeah, that's what I've been focusing most things on is Flutter, mobile, web, everything.
And I think it's interesting to note too, you, as you said early on at the beginning, you're a man of one right now in your current position, and you're working directly with, the company people at the top part of the company saying, hey, it'd be cool to do this. And you need to find something that works best for you to implement that. And right now for you, that's Flutter, given that you're one person. And I think that makes sense. I have done the same thing for clients. Just last October, a client needed an iOS and Android app, and they wanted to test the proof of concept. Sure, could have built both of them, but for that proof of concept and given what they needed, Flutter worked fine. So I did that. But then I have other clients now that need Android. So it just depends on what you need, and you've recognized that, and I think that's important.
Yeah, and there's still very much a place for native on both ends, and it's just circumstantial. And like you said, being a team of one, and also I never wanted to learn. Well, I did for about 10 minutes want to learn iOS, and then I just said I don't want to do this anymore. So this solved that problem for me.
So last question really here for you. What advice would you give someone who is looking to make a big career change like you did? And kind of as, I guess, a part two to that is or you could even incorporate it into the first one is, if you had to give 3 tips to that person making a career change or to make that career change easier, what would you tell that person?
I'd say first and foremost, engulf yourself into the industry. Consume as much content as you can at all times. Podcasts when you're moving, videos when you can, reading when you can, just take in as much information, because here's the thing, most other people aren't doing that. And you can do that and learn really, really rapidly. There's so much great free stuff out there with really brilliant people. And that's what I love about podcasting is that, it's different all the time. So you're just constantly getting exposed to new things. So just engulf yourself. Don't listen to music when you're driving around. Put in a podcast. And I say put in because I'm old.
Like a CD or a tape.
Yeah, exactly. Turn on a podcast. Doing the dishes, turn on a podcast. Sitting on the toilet, read an article. Just engulf yourself, and you will learn at an incredibly rapid pace. The next thing that I would say is get good at interviewing. And really that's a matter of explaining yourself to strangers, and just you can practice just doing that. You don't have to pretend to interview for stuff. Just find some people, maybe they're friends of friends, etc. But get good at talking to people that you don't know and try to explain to them something technical. Try to explain to them, what you want to do and why you want to do it, right? And the more comfortable you get in those situations, the better you're going to be. So get good at interviewing, and don't be afraid to fail an interview. Don't be afraid to go in and say, well, I'm not qualified. I don't really want to interview. Who cares? Just do it. They're not going to punch you in the face. You have almost nothing to lose. So go out there, do it. And every interview that you don't get, every job you don't get is a lesson in, the next step and getting you one step closer to getting that job. So just use it as that. Don't worry about the failure. Worry about what you're learning from that process. And then the next thing would be, prepare yourself ahead of time for what sort of changes. For me, we had to cut back on everything. We were seriously dropping income. Luckily we were very, conservative to begin with, but we had to cut. And we did that, beforehand. Get ready for it. Now that's not going to be everybody's situation, but maybe there's something different. Maybe, you had a really flexible job and this next one isn't going to be flexible, or whatever it is. Prepare yourself, mentally, physically, whatever you have to do. Prepare yourself for that change before you get to it. That would be my top 3.
Thank you for that. Those are super, super tips there. So thanks for coming on the show. And before we get going, I just kind of want to open it up to you. So if you have any shout outs you want to put out there, or if people want to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you or see your work or anything like that? Anything you want to share, Twitter, anything, it's your place. And then of course, we'll always add this stuff to the show notes too.
Sure. The only place you could find me would be probably Twitter at the Liberty Coder. But honestly, if you're looking for programming content, it isn't there. It's mostly a bunch of anti-statist content. So, but you want to hit me up, you have a question, please feel free, shoot me a DM. If you're in the same sort of position, I'm happy to help, happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Well, Ephraim, thank you for taking the time to explain your story, tell us all the different tips you had, and just share your wisdom with all the listeners. I think it's super valuable. There's a lot of people that want to make these career changes. They're very scared to. You literally just spent, 45 plus minutes giving us a complete college course on this. So thank you very much for taking the time.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you having me. This was a lot of fun. Thanks, Donn.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening to the episode. And we will catch you very soon on the next one. All right, before we head out, don't forget, you can get 3 months of Stoa, the community platform for creators, by going to getstoa.com and plug in your email address, and that's it. Again, that's getstoa.com.
That's it for the show, folks. Fragmented is hosted by Donn Felker and me, Kaushik Gopal. We edit and produce all the episodes here on Fragmented. You can find more Fragmented episodes at fragmentedpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you in the next episode.